Welcome to Hood Champion Boxing and Sports. In boxing, you find a way to win or you find a way to lose. A lot of people have opinions about Jake Paul. But one thing I think most people agree on when it comes to Jake Paul is, look, man, his name is synonymous with, that dollar bill, y'all, Wu-Tang Cream. Make sure y'all like and subscribe. Follow me on Twitter. Follow me on Instagram. Leave that donation for that fried rice and chicken wings. But more importantly, become a member to the channel. If you enjoy my content, you'll be sneaking in watching my videos. At a minimum, you should become a member. Trust me, it makes a big deal, and it really does help me out. So at the end of the day, viewers, subscribers, members are the real MVPs, not us content creators, or not me. I ain't gonna speak for nobody else. But you guys are the real MVPs. I want to make sure you guys know that. Anyway, Jake Paul, man, helping PBC, helping Gervonta Davis stay afloat, what some people are saying. I just think when you look at, move this back, when you look at boxing as a whole, it's those individuals who come into boxing, man, who bring a lot of money or who generate a lot of money, they tend to become key players in the sport. It's like rising from the ashes like the phoenix, and all of a sudden, boom, they're this permanent fixture, and they're making decisions. And you look at Jake Paul, you got all these guys who've been putting in work in boxing for a long time, all seem to want a piece of Jake Paul. But I'll tell you what, when you look at the state of boxing business today, one of the biggest questions fans are asking is whether PBC, premier boxing champions, if they actually need a spectacle like Gervonta Tank Davis versus Jake Paul just to survive financially. Now, it's no secret. There have been a lot of rumors and speculation over the last couple of years about PBC. You've seen a drastic decline in their activity and their stable of fighters fighting. So when you hear something like that and you see kind of the decomposition of PBC, it kind of makes sense that there may be some kind of financial struggle. But I'll be honest with you, I don't know. But I will tell you that now on the surface, that shit may sound insane to some people, but as far as Jake Paul and Gervonta Davis and PBC needing that spectacle, but PBC has stars. PBC has, television deals, and PBC has built its reputation, around being one of the few organizations to deliver consistent fights in the American market. They've slowed down. They've been barely hanging on, but they've slowed down big time. But I just think you got to stop and start to peel the layers back. You know what I'm saying? And when you start to peel the layers back, you start to see the cracks. Because boxing today isn't just about putting on good fights. It's really about generating massive revenue. The crossover, attention, and trying to survive. Especially with boxing, just a rapidly changing industry. And everyone seemed to have kind of jumped onto the Turki Alalshikh Riyadh season bandwagon smartly, smartly. The DAZN bandwagon smartly. PBC seems to be the last platform to really want to get involved with that. But it looks like the Jake Paul and Tank Davis fight is one thing, but I know for a fact that Turki Alalshikh is going to be funding some fights down the road. Come here, baby. You finished? Okay, I'll come check in a second, right? It's my little man right there. But I know they're going to be funding some of the events. So the bottom line is the industry is rapidly changing, and PBC's got to figure some things out. But, PBC has been rumored to be struggling with money. There were all kind of whispers going on, man, about liquidity problems, high fighter guarantees, and the constant pressure to deliver pay-per-view numbers that actually hit break-even are very real. Also, I heard stuff about Al Heyman, his health, all kind of stuff. But I think the truth kind of lies somewhere in between all the rumors, you know what I'm saying? But one thing we know is whenever Tank fights, the purses are high. The production costs are high. The marketing has to hit a certain level just for it to make sense. But as we've seen across multiple Tank events, he can sell out arenas. He's, breaking live gate records everywhere this man goes. He can bring in strong gates, but the question is, are those numbers truly enough to keep PBC financially stable long term? This is why the thought of a Jake Paul fight becomes so tantalizing. And that's also why some people feel it's become a reality. Now, when it comes to Jake Paul, I call him Jizzle P, right? He need to let that hair go too. The man, you're receding. Let the shit go. It's like me. If my hair if I start to lose hair up here, I'll come in here the next day with a bald head. I don't care. But that has nothing to do with anything. But whether you love Jizzle P or not, he's one of the biggest marketing machines in the sport of boxing. He brings in casuals, he brings in influencers, new money, and mainstream attention. And for those of you who wonder how Jake Paul is able to do the things he's doing, one is he's putting in the work. But that dude is connected. Him and his brother, they're connected, man. They got Donald Trump on speed dial. So when you got a connection to the president, you're a money-making machine, people want to work with you, you'll be surprised. I mean, it's no surprise to me how he's able to make things work and make things click. You know what I'm saying? But one thing for sure with this fight, although it's getting the mainstream attention that Jake Paul craves, Tank Davis is one of the most explosive knockout artists in boxing and already has a star power. But he's a 135-pounder, so how far are we going to take it to the stupid as far as Jake Paul getting in there knocking out, Tank knocking out Jake Paul. But I just think when you bring Tank Davis and Jake Paul together, I think you have a fight that would easily cross into million-plus pay-per-view territory. Perhaps even rivaling Canelo-level buys and the live gate, no kidding, out there in Miami. That shit could be astronomical. So when you look at this from a business perspective, if PBC is really strapped for cash, a fight like Tank versus Jake is not just a luxury, not just a freak show, not just a spectacle. This could, no kidding, be a lifeline to PBC. Now, if this is true, and there's some kind of financial distress over there with Al Heyman and the crew, some kind of financial bind, I wonder, what would they do? What would they do with the money from a fight like this? First, I think you could see a portion go directly to fighters' guarantees. Tank commands a large purse, and Jake isn't fighting for peanuts. Then you see money earned for debt clearance or obligations to networks, if this is the case, right? We're just talking hypothetically. And then, let's not forget that PBC has to keep its roster happy. You got fighters like Charlo, Earl Spence, and others. Them guys are used to big checks. But if the company can't produce that kind of money, fighters start looking elsewhere. Or they sit in a dormant status, like so many of them are right now. So that the Tank versus Jake money wouldn't just be about profit. I think it'd be a lot about survival, plugging leaks in the boat before the whole boat sinks. Because this is a serious conversation. But all that being said, here's where it gets interesting. Turki Alalshikh. When Turkey's in the house, every day is Thanksgiving. If the Saudi advisor, promoter, Turki Alalshikh, if he's been willing to fund certain PBC events, like we're already seeing with the mega events being exported to Riyadh, right? And a lot of the events he's having in the States. Why not bankroll something as big as Jake Paul versus Gervonta Davis? The answer might lie in respect. Because there were a lot of people saying, damn, Turki Alalshikh putting the money up for these two? No, Turki Alalshikh don't have nothing to do with it. And I think do I think he would get involved? He'll get involved with PBC, with the Jake Paul and Tank fight. I don't know. But the answer may just lie in respect, because Turki Alalshikh, I think he has some respect for Jake Paul. I've seen him take a picture with him. But for Tank, I'm sure Turki Alalshikh could work things out. Because remember, Tank was like, give me 2 Ferraris or 2 Lamborghinis. He threw something very disrespectful at Turki Alalshikh, and Turki Alalshikh was like, I'll give you 2 gloves. But Turki Alalshikh has shown us time and time again that he values legacy fights. He wants drama. He doesn't want dominance. He wants historical moments. and matchups that cement boxing history. You got to understand with Turki Alalshikh, man, he's going to fund you. You got to keep in mind, he brought to us Fury Usyk. He brought to us Crawford Canelo. So you can just see from those fights that he funds fights that rewrite the record books. To him, I think, and this is just my opinion, a fight like Jake Paul versus Tank Davis may look more like a circus act than a legitimate piece of boxing history. And you can tell that Turki Alalshikh wants to stay far away from the circus acts, and he wants his Riyadh season brand to be more about legitimate fights, big drama, big action, not the bearded fat lady running around, the man on the unicycle, the bear juggling balls, all the clowns getting into a car. You don't want that shit. But anyway, if there's one thing we learn about Turki Alalshikh, he respects the sport. And he wants Saudi Arabia's name tied to prestige, not parity. And the other thing people need to understand about Turki Alalshikh is Turki Alalshikh is working for the king and the prince over there. He always talks about the two big mountains he has behind him. So he is doing what the king and the prince wants. He goes to him, I'm sure he's like, hey, sir, this is kind of what we're looking at. And they're like, yay and nay. And those are his marching orders, so he's got to come out and do, as instructed. But now that we've kind of cleared some of that up about Turki Alalshikh and whether he would get involved with a Jake Paul, Gervonta Davis fight, I think it may interest him, but he would stay away from that. But PBC fights down the road, legitimate fights, he was no kidding with. He is getting involved with that and funding some of those. So that's a fact what I'm telling you. You go out there and read all about it. But this whole conversation opens up a much darker interpretation. Could it be that Turki Alalshikh doesn't respect Gervonta Davis and Jake Paul enough to invest in them as centerpiece fighters? It's not far-fetched because you got to think about it. Tank is a star in the United States, but doesn't have the global recognition on the same level as a Canelo, Tyson Fury, or Anthony Joshua. Not really. He's a big name, but he's not on that level yet. He's a box office name in America, but we're talking about globally. And his numbers don't carry the same weight. Jake Paul, on the other hand, has global recognition, but much of it's tied to YouTube, controversy, and novelty. So when you look at a guy like Turki Alalshikh, we know when Turkey's in the house every day is Thanksgiving. From his perspective, taking Gervonta Davis and Jake together may not represent the kind of boxing respect that Turkey wants to buy for Saudi Arabia. And this is the crux of the conversation. PBC may need Jake Paul versus Tank Davis to stay afloat, but Saudi Arabia may not be interested in saving them unless it's a fight that truly builds boxing's long-term credibility. He's not just going to get involved with something because it's hot. No, he's looking for something that is going to add to what he's trying to create, his legacy for his Riyadh season brand. And it's got to be something that builds boxing credibility long term. Now, if that's the case, PBC's stuck in a dilemma. Big time. Do they come out here now and try to find domestic money to fund Tank versus Jake, hoping to cash out big, or do they continue relying on Turki Alalshikh? Sounds like they've got all that sorted out already. But I just think Turki Alalshikh, his taste is more refined and risks being boxed out in their own promotional decisions. Because one thing for sure, if Turki Alalshikh gets involved, he's going to want things done his way. So, there's a reason why Turki Alalshikh, is not involved with this event. But the dangerous truth with all of this is, I think if Turki Alalshikh wanted to get involved and put the money up, I think they would have allowed it. Because this is business, man. Money talks, BS walks. But one thing for sure, Jake Paul doesn't want to lose control. Nobody wants to lose control. And Jake Paul, he and MVP Promotions have a really good thing going. So you just got to be real about that and give them the credit for what they've done as, smart businessmen in the sport of boxing. But the dangerous truth is this. If PBC is really broke, a fight like Tank versus Jake is the definition of a Hail Mary. You know what I'm saying? Like, go deep, go deep. I remember playing that shit playing football, his kids throwing a bomb. He's be there huddling up. You tell this one go deep, you go out 10, cross to the right flank here. I think this is a Hail Mary, man. It's a cash grab. It's a survival mode, but survival modes don't build legacies because everybody's hating Tank Davis for this shit. They respect him hustling to get some money, but they're like, this shit is whack. As far as a fight, we all know it's a joke. But the bottom line is, a fight like this is just extending time, and giving PBC a little bit more money, a little breathing room, gets Tank back busy and active. But that's where the fans, they can sit back and debate this shit, and it's going to get spicy. Some people agree, some don't agree. Because if Tank takes another fight like this, fans are going to argue, is he fighting for legacy or is he just bailing out his promoter? We all know with Jake Paul, him fighting Tank, in Jake Paul's mind, he's legitimizing himself. But at the same time, maybe Jake Paul also sees this as an opportunity to work with PBC, and maybe he has a little bit more flexibility, because if PBC has a little bit of financial weakness right now, maybe Jake Paul was to come in there and kind of had the kind of flexibility he wanted to apply a little leverage in the negotiations to kind of be like, look, you either take it or leave it, because without me, you guys are stuck in the mud. But I think Jake Paul and Tank already had some stuff worked out before, and I think they just picked up where they left off, and now we're here. But at the end of the day, everyone's going to have an opinion about PBC, about Jake Paul, about Tank. Should the fight be happening? Why isn't Turki Alalshikh getting involved? If Tank fights another one of these spectacle-type fights instead of Lamont Roach, then what is Tank really doing? Look, the debate boils down to this. Everyone feels boxing's at a crossroads. I don't think so. With PBC, you don't really know what they're doing. They're the unknown here. People are trying to solve for the unknown. But Al Heyman doesn't say anything. So that's why people come out here and they just start speculating and conversating, because they don't know. But they want to know. But I think one thing's for sure, PBC is doubling down. And this spectacle they have going on between Jake Paul and Tank Davis, I personally think that's a way for them to stay alive. That's just my opinion. But I also feel you're going to see what the future holds. Turki Alalshikh is getting involved with PBC now, not for this fight in particular. And he's going to continue reshaping the sport of boxing and making sure you get those prestige matchups from PBC fighters that we're used to getting for so many years, but have kind of been put on pause, or on hold. I'm talking military shit to y'all. Been put on hold. So we just got to sit back and see, where does Gervonta Davis fit into this whole equation? Because he's the biggest star over on PBC. Aside from Floyd Mayweather, who's retired, but even he's talking about coming back to fight. Why? You know what I'm saying? Is Floyd coming back to help patch them holes on that PBC boat to prevent it from sinking? You just don't know. But at the end of the day, I don't think Turki may have seen a guy like Tank worthy of a Saudi investment after Tank kind of disrespected him. But right now, I think Turki was able to get beyond Tank shit. I think Tank is realizing we do need Turki. I think PBC is realizing we need Saudi. And they also realize they need Jake Paul just to breathe. And maybe Tank isn't as secure a star as fans believe. You know what I'm saying? Because if his own promotional company can't pay him, his promotional platform, PBC, if they can't pay him the money he was used to getting, and they got to take a fight like Jake Paul, that just lets you know that there's not the security there that we thought that PBC had. And that means that Tank Davis probably felt a bit compelled to take a fight like this with Jake Paul, knowing the backlash he would get. But Tank don't care. He ain't about legacy. He's about his money. So it is what it is. I don't know. We just got to sit back and see, because, maybe there's no story about Jake Paul and helping PBC remain afloat. Maybe Turki Alalshikh doesn't need to help PBC remain afloat. Maybe we're getting this all wrong, but, it makes for a good conversation. Is the PBC's empire, is it crumbling right before our eyes? I don't know. But as far as them being desperate to keep it standing, I don't know if desperate is the right word, but I think they're open to looking at different things that can be done to definitely keep PBC standing and standing strong and to get their roster back active. And to be honest with you, I think they need to do that. It's okay to go out there and get help, and do that before you lose everything. But again, I don't know what's going on with PBC. But, some people are saying they claim to have their sources, the inside scoop. Everybody got the goddamn secret squirrel, you know what I mean? Hood Champion doesn't. I just read a lot, and then I come and I ask certain questions, and I put together my outline, and we talk. That being said, y'all keep cool. More to come on PBC, the Jake Paul fight. There's going to be future spectacles from their big-name fighters. And is Turki and just how involved is Turki getting? I know he's putting up some funding, but is he going to basically assume control of all of PBC's operations? We don't know, but one thing we do know is PBC they have the biggest footprint in America as far as domestic fights. Nobody else has a roster like them here in America. PBC had that shit locked down for years, and they still do. If Turki Alalshikh is really putting the funding up for future fights, PBC is about to take off again, but you're going to see Riyadh season brand. That's what you're going to be seeing on the rings. You'll see PBC in a little small, writing there in the little corners on the canvas, but everything will be Riyadh season. It'll be PBC fighters, but everything will be Riyadh season. Anyway, that's the trade-off, right? Y'all keep cool. Shout out to the veterans, all 7 continents. Yo, I'm in the breeze.